I'm Eric Hill.
And I guess we've been married almost 6 years in August. I'm at WB Hill 89.
And I'm at Eric_Hill. Very original.
So I guess this is totally not our thing and totally outside of our comfort zone, but like a lot of people, we have differences of opinions on
Everything.
how it's going with how we met, but everything is not quite accurate. So it depends on who you ask about how we met, but I would say first interaction was at Dawson in Sunday school. You just don't necessarily remember that part.
Sunday school or in the chapel?
Either one, tomato. It was somewhere at Dawson, depending on if it was the service or in Sunday school. But you don't remember any of that, which is why you don't remember where it was.
I do. I just didn't realize it was the first time.
Okay. But clearly, there's zero recollection of this leads into how much game you also had.
Well, I had zero game. I don't know how we got married.
Two.
I think she was desperate by that point.
Quite possibly. But no, in all seriousness, I mean, it did take you a little bit to...
I thought I had zero chance. Honestly, I thought it was just going to be friend zone automatically.
But you weren't. You needed a little nudge and a little help to get you there.
It's the theme of our marriage.
That is also very true. But what, we dated roughly there about 6 months?
April to October?
November.
I can't remember when the football game is. I just know it was Bama LSU weekend.
Which is always in November.
Well, I don't know. I'm an Auburn fan. I don't know these things. Then did it for 6 months. We're engaged for 9 months until the following August.
Dear goodness.
Samuel was born in July. We were married August 9th. 6 years ago this year.
There you go. See, you worked through a little bit. But no, I mean, the running joke is that I liked you 2 days before you proposed, which is...
That's when you started liking me.
Which is an exaggeration. It's not quite true. But...
It's close.
He had quite an uphill battle to get me there.
I don't give up for things I want. It's just the
And-
things I really want.
Well, and I mean, both of us in previous relationships had not so great experiences, not necessarily to say that
We still had wounds.
the people we dated previously were bad people. It's just they were unhealthy relationships. And so a lot had to be overcome in order for both of us to feel comfortable and get our walls down around each other and truly be vulnerable to each other and fully trust each other. Fair?
Fair. Mine just came down a lot faster, as they usually do. You're a much
fair.
more guarded and risk-adverse person in general.
Which is not a bad thing.
No.
Just was bad if you were trying to
date you.
Yeah. But all joking aside, you knew I liked you prior to 2 days before you proposed. But it wasn't that much. And it's not like 6 months. I mean, we didn't date necessarily too long.
And we only knew each other for a couple months before we even started dating too.
But again, I mean, what does the saying go? After you kiss so many frogs, you know when you found your prince? Aww. But, you know, I mean, we both had dated and were a little bit older at the time to where we knew what we didn't want. We knew the crap that we didn't want to put up with. So you say that we're different in a lot of ways, which we are, but we're similar about the big
We're
things,
similar
which
to
matter.
the things that really matter.
Yeah, so it works. And I will say, as you were stumbling through the timeline of when we dated and when you proposed and all of those things, that...
Since we don't have a firm timeline on when we actually started dating.
Would you let me finish my thought? What I was saying was the football season that we were engaged, which would have been our first football season together, was the kick 6. So if we can survive that, then we could pretty much...
And we barely survived that.
I mean, I did make a phone call telling you not to come over to my parents' house because Daddy had lots of guns, and it was joking.
Alabama, Auburn.
So, that's the joking matter, but if we can survive that, I mean, which is we can get through a
That
lot.
early in the relationship, yep.
But I will say, so I mean, I guess we've been fortunate and blessed that of our dating, and I guess really since we've been in each other's lives, that we've not, I mean, we've had our struggles to overcome, but nothing that I feel like has ever,
Well, that's the breaking point.
yeah, which I mean, I think that I don't know that anything ever will, because I mean, I think you and I both believe and are, once we say we're committed to each other, then we're truly committed and we'll figure it out. But I would say the thing that's, or for me at least, which I think, I don't want to speak for you, but that wasn't supposed to be funny. But I would say the thing that's probably tested us the most is when we mutually agreed and decided that we wanted to grow our family more than just four-legged children, and got to a point that we were ready to have children. And my voice is getting shaky because, I mean, like I said, this is probably, it's one of the hardest times of my 30-some odd years of knowing it was going to be difficult for us, but not necessarily knowing what that journey was going to look like. Fully trusting and believing that we would be parents somehow, whether biologically or through adoption, knowing that God had a plan for us that was going to be good for us. But still, it was hard. It was a hard journey to have to walk through what, this is where my time frame gets a little fuzzy, but what did we go through infertility treatments and discussions and things for what, a year and a half?
Something like that. I've lost track of the whole time of when we decided,
But
then when we realized that we needed to start that process, and then
either way, it was a long period, and I know we were fortunate, obviously, that we had Samuel, and there are so many couples that go through so much of a longer journey than what we have, but it was still a hard journey to walk through all the same.
next from my side, I'm sitting there and I can't do anything. It's just standing back and watching, see how hard it is for her because she's doing everything she can and it's still not able to happen until it was God's timing. And that was where we had to really learn God's timing is really the only timing that there is in our lives.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I mean, you know, it was a stressor and it was a struggle just because we were both going through a lot individually and going through a lot together. But you always hear God's timing is perfect, and it was perfect for us.
And he gave us little signs along the way as well.
Yeah. I mean, we got pregnant during a time that medical professionals would have said it wasn't supposed to happen, which in and of itself.
Because we'd actually taken a
speaks
break
to
from the treatment, and that was when, during that break, we actually did become pregnant.
So those of us that know us know that our son's name, who will be 3 in July, is Samuel. But I guess background story to where we knew, or we talked about kids' names, you know, before we got to the point.
But we still didn't know if it was a boy or a girl at this point.
But we knew if he was a boy, he was going to be named after your granddad, who goes by Sam, but we decided to say Samuel. And if it was a girl, we will hold back that name. But if it was a girl, we'd already agreed on a girl's name as well. But I think for me, one of the times that I've probably come the closest to hearing God audibly speak was when Samuel's name took on a little bit different meaning, to where we were in Sunday school, again, at Dawson. And we were studying about influential men and women of the Bible, and we just so happened to be studying the story of Samuel in 1 Samuel and the story of Hannah. And I probably wasn't quite paying attention as much as I should have been to the lesson, but they needed someone to read a scripture verse, so I raised my hand and said, sure, I'll read it. And Eric shot me this weird look like, are you about to do this? And at the time, I was pregnant and we knew we were expecting. We're actually to find out the gender the following week. So at any rate, I go and look, and I'm about to start reading the scripture and cannot get through reading it because I'm just filled with emotion. And
It's 1 Samuel 4:9, for this child we afraid.
Yeah, and Hannah was praying to God for what would be her child named Samuel. And like, I can't explain it, and it's something that's completely unexplainable other than to say total God moment of, I got in the car, we left church, and I looked at Eric, and
And she's never one short for words, as you can tell, but she literally had to stop in the middle of the verse, and I had to finish it for her because she was so overcome.
But I knew without a shadow of a doubt that we were having a boy. And spoiler alert, Samuel's a boy.
Name Samuel.
But it was at that point that Samuel's name took on a whole different meaning for us, because I think when we interact with people that don't necessarily know your family or the origin of kind of Samuel's name, they kind of jump to the biblical meaning of Samuel, which is true, but that's not necessarily how it started. But I think it's just neat to see how God like weaves through and kind of creates his story out of everything, in the sense of Samuel was always meant to be Samuel, but it's even more special kind of sitting where we are now today. So I don't know, that for me is probably the hardest thing we've walked through, and it's
by far, 'cause it was out of our control. We couldn't do anything. It was all sitting back and waiting for God's timing.
and slight control freak. You know, that's not always the easiest part. But looking back, I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I think it did bring us closer together. And since then, you know, we have had to walk through some more difficult moments and times. And I think, you know, having walked through that together as a couple in our faith, and then individually, because it was very much an individual journey and struggle there as well, that I think, you know, not that we would ever hit pause or quit, but I think having walked through that and seeing what that looks like, it's kind of like we know we can make it through anything, but having walked through that, especially kind of earlier on, I think just made us stronger for it. But I've rambled on a lot about that, and I could talk for far longer about that, just because, I mean, I'm so thankful that we did have others in our lives that surrounded us and loved on us at that moment, that some had walked through that, some hadn't. But I think it gives you a different perspective. I'm not always the most open book, but I think it just goes to show, like, you never know what somebody else is going through. Cliche as it may sound, but I don't know, I think it's taught me how to love others better for where they are. Not knowing what someone may be going through, but just being there to love on them, and being that friend. Just because we had so many people do that for us.
And don't assume that just because somebody doesn't have kids that they either don't want kids or they're not going through this. And just since we went through, we understand that some of the questions of, well, when are you going to have kids? That could be a trigger point to a lot of people that are struggling with that. So just understanding that helps us to not, I don't want to say put the burden, but not ask those kind of questions that might trigger somebody that's going through that or that has a desire in their heart. But
just don't be assuming.
Yeah.
On a lighter note, I would say probably kind of switching gears a little bit. But I feel like some of the best piece of advice that we've ever gotten or been given about relationships or marriage in general, or just kind of anything. But I feel like one of the things that people always tell you when you get married is to never stop dating your spouse. And you hear that a lot, and you think, oh, you know, totally fine, you know, all these things.
You're always dating, you live together.
Yeah, sure, all the things. But I would say, you know, how true that is when the dynamic of your marriage and your relationship changes once you do have kids. Which Samuel's the most rewarding thing that I've ever done, but also the hardest thing, and can test you individually and can test you as a couple, just because the dynamics of our relationship does change after you have kids. Shocker there, but it's like you hear these things, but until you walk through it and you go through it, you don't necessarily know what that looks like, to where, you know, everything you do is centered around that, to where, I mean,
you still gotta make sure you keep your marriage as your number one relationship.
Well, aside from
outside of Christ.
Yeah.
Your number one human relationship.
Which is easier said than done sometimes, but we are fortunate and blessed that, you know, we have family here that's eager, uber eager to come help. But, I I mean, you and I like to do things together. Hence, we like to go to the gym and work out and all of these things, and even the dynamics of what that looks like looks completely different. So really truly figuring out what the two of us enjoy to where we still have that time and that time to connect with each other, I would say has been really instrumental. I'm very much a quality time person, which if you have not, or if anybody hasn't ever taken, the 5 love language and figuring out what you are and what your spouse is, highly recommend that. We are not the same, and so...
But it helps you to understand how to love the other person because you know what they value and need, and to where you're able to invest back in them.
Yeah. So I'm very much a quality time person. So trying to figure out how to still get that quality time.
And do the things we both like to do.
It's a little bit of a struggle at first, but we got there. And I think too, quality time with you, but also you recognizing probably pretty early on, probably earlier than I did, that I still needed quality time, like with myself, before Mama loses it and loses all of my marbles. So I would say, that's something that I'm extremely thankful for and grateful for, that you did realize that, and you are a phenomenal father and stepped up and kind of helped me to be able to still say, hey, Mama needs, if nothing else, just to go to Target and wander the aisles for 10 to 15 minutes, maybe an hour or two. But I think it's finding that common ground and being able to communicate, that word.
Not always easy.
But I think, it's acknowledging that, hey, let's circle back and let's...
Because while we're still very different, we're also very similar in a lot of the things. And so it's just making sure that we're still finding the commonalities, that we can invest in each other, invest in our marriage, invest in our son and everybody else too.
Because at the end of the day, I stop back and thinking sometimes this is easier said than done, but at the end of the day, if I go to sleep knowing that Samuel feels loved, knows that I love him, you feel loved, know that I love you, and I've done the best that I can, then I think that's what I want to remember and be known for. And I feel like someone, speaking personally, that can fly off the handle and get so overwhelmed and stressed out to total type A, all the things, that if I can keep that in perspective, then that makes a big difference for me.
At the end of the day, as long as you're not going to bed angry at the other person, will help you be able to get a good night's sleep and wake up and start it all over again, because each day is a new battle and a new step.
But nothing that can't be overcome.
Not all.
Including Alabama. That's our story.
It's another one of those God moments, but good father. Because while she was pregnant, that song came on and she could feel Samuel was jumping in her stomach.
Yeah, I'd say that's the reassurance and just the little hello, like it's all going to be okay.